Let's talk about the specific charges of corruption and bribery that have been made against Berlusconi. Do you think the average Italian regards these charges as outrageous, or do they somehow come to expect business leaders to bribe the taxman, for example, to avoid paying taxes?
Well, I think it's true that one reason why there's been a high level of toleration for Berlusconi and his legal problems is that many Italians do skirt the law, in many cases feel they're forced to skirt the law by excessive regulation. There are something like 70,000 or 90,000 laws in Italy and only 5,000 in France or Germany.
Tax laws.
Just laws in general. Their life is very regulated. But I think that what many Italians don't know, because it hasn't been publicized, is that the kind of bribery and the kind of corner cutting that Berlusconi and his company has done is on an entirely different scale.
That's not being reported to the Italian people in detail.
It is reported, but it's, for example, never explained on TV. So that, for example, what you'll get on TV is Berlusconi or one of his lawyers saying, "This is outrageous. They've invented an entire case based on no evidence." And then a journalist doesn't intervene and say, actually the evidence is this, and there are two ways of looking at this case. You only get, he's been accused of bribing a judge, a contradiction of that charge by saying it's invented, and no independent analysis of what the facts are.
Do you regard the newspapers, as opposed to the television, as free in Italy, and haven't they been some of the primary critics of Berlusconi?
Well, they have, but it's interesting. Berlusconi doesn't much worry about newspapers that are, or magazines that are sort of clearly on the left. He knows that their readers will never vote for him. Where Berlusconi has dedicated his attention are in the print media that have a broad mainstream centrist readership.
Like we saw in the film.
The Corriere della Sera is the prime example. La Stampa, the newspaper of Turin, is the other. They are big centrists. It's like the Washington Post and the New York Times here in Italy. And he has been able to exercise a lot of indirect control of those papers.
But can't you read in Corriere della Sera today, tomorrow, next week, strong criticism of Berlusconi?
You would think that that would happen in any in a naturally free press, and that has not happened in Italy. So that as a result, the average sort of center voter doesn't quite know what to believe. I think actually, if they examine them closely, they'd be quite shocked.
Well, we found that very interesting in the film, that you had his lawyers, his very own lawyers in his trial, going back as parliamentarians to change the laws to his advantage. Could that happen in any other country, or is that pretty unique to Italy?
Maybe somewhere in South America, but I'm not aware of it happening in any advanced democracy. It's a very, very anomalous and peculiar situation. They literally would spend 2 or 3 days a week in Milan defending Berlusconi in their black lawyerly robes, and then fly back to Rome and then rewrite the laws that would then short-circuit the very trials in which he was a defendant. And that happens in all sorts of areas, including business areas, economic legislation.
How much do you think the Berlusconi model is playing out in other parts of the world?
Well, I think the thing that makes Berlusconi a really interesting, important figure is that he crystallizes in a very dramatic way problems and issues that exist in all modern democracies now, in every society, including ours. Money, media, and political power are very closely connected. He's understood, maybe more than any politician, that if something doesn't appear on television, it doesn't exist. You look at the recent decision of Arnold Schwarzenegger to enter the race for governorship. The fact that he is a celebrity, a TV personality, movie personality with an enormous amount of money makes him a player from one day to the next. I don't think people have fully processed how deeply television has changed the political process in our own world. Political parties have become vestiges of what they were, and individuals and large amounts of money can leapfrog over that process. In Italy, it exists in a much kind of neuter and cruder way, but I think people everywhere in this country as well have a very dismaying feeling that politics is going over their heads, is being decided by wealthy interests that don't take them into consideration and are bending the legislative process in their own behalf. People get used to that and say, well, if they can do that in Italy, then what's the big deal if I do it to a lesser degree here in France or in England or in this country? And so I think it's setting precedents that are unhealthy for democracy.
Alexander Stilla, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.